am I going to get right the first time, but how quickly can I get the feedback saying it's not going as planned? So now what additional things can we do? Do we need to adjust the goal, or is it we just need to change our activity or something else along the way because of things that have arisen through that process?
Oh, today we are going to be talking about something that maybe we all have faced at one point or another, or if we haven't yet, we will in business. And this is when things don't go as planned. What do we do? How do we not fall apart? How do we take action steps towards a goal, or maybe shift and course correct? And so today, Tanner and I are going to be talking about this very topic, something I've recently experienced, as maybe many of you have, or some of you have. So all right, Tanner, let's talk about course correcting.
Yeah, it's a fun topic, lots of different things, especially as we come kind of to as we're recording this, the conclusion of the year. I think by the time this is out, it'll be, the very start of 2025. So really a good time to even think through, what are some setbacks over the course of even the past year, and how did you overcome them versus like how can I do differently or do potentially better in overcoming those as we potentially face them again in the future, and different things as we do a look back. So excited for the topic today.
Yes, me too, because everything can be a learning opportunity, even if things don't go as planned. And every time we face something that doesn't go as planned, I think that's a huge opportunity to grow. And I think we almost learn better in those moments and come up with ideas of how can we, when we're faced with something like this or a challenge like this in the future, how can we act and use what we've learned from that experience? And so, let's kick it off. What are some things maybe like where people are in these moments of what do I do? I have this thing I wanted to do, whether maybe it's a project, maybe it's something you're doing for your business and it's not going as planned. And how do we just like take a pause there?
Yeah, I think it starts with the proper preparation, and I mean that more in the context of if you've got some sort of plan, whether it's a project plan, it's a quarterly plan, it's the annual plan for your business, the preparation of like how frequently are we going to be reviewing the plan? Is this something that we look at, set the plan at the very beginning, and then didn't look at it until the very, very end, and things happened along the way, or was this was our preparation saying, hey, we're going to take a look at this every single week. By the end of the week, we're going to determine where are we at? Are we on plan? Are we off plan? Like what's happening so that we have the ability to kind of make course corrections as quickly as possible, right? I think that's probably the first piece of it is understanding that the preparation does matter. It's not always the preparation of, am I going to get right the first time, but how quickly can I get the feedback saying it's not going as planned? So now what additional things can we do? Do we need to adjust the goal, or is it we just need to change our activity or something else along the way because of things that have arisen through that process?
Oh, definitely. I think that's huge. And that's something you and I talked about as we were planning for this said project I was working on when I had this experience. And that really helped me to, see what was in front of me. And in my case, it was numbers and take the setback that I had and use those numbers as a guide. Like, okay, so now this opportunity has changed, how can I still work with it to have a successful event or, project outcome? And so you're right, just looking at, I think numbers is a huge one. That's what really helped me was just knowing where I was at with my numbers and then adjusting when we had to make the adjustment and still come out ahead.
Yeah, that's me. I'm a very data driven numbers guy. I really like to talk through the concept that in reality, while it may not feel like it all the time, the numbers are just the numbers. They're not judgmental. They're not emotional, anything else. They're just data points, which allows us to make some decisions because we have them. So, part of it could be, I feel like I have setbacks because this is the first time I've looked at it this way before. And maybe my planning process was just wrong. I wasn't good at it yet. It's the first iteration of going through it, and that's okay, right? I remember going through a couple different times when we started the process of like doing a proper budget, and not just from an expense standpoint, but even from like a marketing and sales and like forecasting some of our numbers within our business. In the first few iterations, the first few quarters of going through it, we were never on track. And it was like, oh, we're going to set this goal out here, but we didn't have the historical data to like back up why we were choosing the goals. So they were just arbitrary numbers that we threw out there, thinking that it was going to get us to the end result that we needed. So almost always, you might have a number or two that kind of hit plan, but oftentimes we were just really far off. And that was really more a course of I didn't know what I didn't know yet. So I had to go through this iterative process of learning how to properly plan. I think I was told a year or two ago that on average it takes 2 to 3 years to get good at this planning or budgeting process because of
Mhm.
the iteration process that comes along with it. So sometimes it's just they're not necessarily setbacks. It's I'm now looking at things at a deeper level that I hadn't been looking at before. And because of that, I can see where there's gaps. And it feels like that's really uncomfortable, right? But in reality, it's just taking a look at it and saying, okay, this is what's actually happening, which means the next time I do it, I'm going to go off of that as the base. Instead of what I
Mm.
think is going to happen, I'm going to go with this is what actually happened. Now, what can I do to influence that to get it a little bit better next time and do a little bit better the following time? So I think from a setback standpoint, sometimes it can feel like they're setbacks when in reality it's just walking through the process of learning. Now, obviously, there's also other times when unforeseen things happen, and we just have to make adjustments. And I think that was something that we talked about in kind of the process that you went through. Is there was some unforeseen stuff. It's like, oh, yeah, that's a big deal. Now we need to make some adjustments because of it. But because we're looking at numbers, because we're looking at the results on a consistent basis, we're able to take a look at it and say, well, what can I do differently? Maybe the output or the outcome can't be the same as what I initially planned, but what decisions can I make today that's going to get us as close as possible to that same end result? What activity needs to change? What pricing points need to change for different things, or what team do I need to get involved? Right? We can start thinking critically about what's going to actually move the needle to get us as close as possible to the original goal, and then just take it all as data points to be able to do a more accurate way of kind of planning and going about that in the future.
Oh, definitely. You touched on a lot of true points there, especially in, my experience with my project that it really was because of that conversation we had, having those data points, I was able to make an opportunity and see, okay, now I have this to work with. How can I work within that and bring it to the best of my abilities? And it ended up being there was like a little hidden blessing in disguise. It ended up being a better fit in the at least for the short term that we can build towards the long term and use that as a jump off point. And yes, kind of just sometimes you gotta throw something out there. If you don't know, we don't know what we don't know. But then we have that as a baseline and we can say, okay, what did I learn from this? How can I adjust? Maybe for me, it was more of a realistic perspective and I gained that out of this. And now I can go back to the drawing board and say, hey, we have these data points. How can we maybe make it 10% better the next time rather than going 1,000 times percent better or, a significant, but something that's a little bit more actionable and less overwhelming. So I think you nailed it on the head there with, at least taking that as, this wasn't a setback. This was a learning curve. This was an opportunity to take something I didn't know, and now I know.
Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned at the beginning, just getting through kind of towards the end of the year here as we're recording, just even on Friday, just went through some annual planning with a lot of our clients, and part of the process of that was doing the look back. Like, let's take a look at this last year. Did we hit our goals? Did we not? On a macro level, like I had these three goals I was going to achieve this year. Did I hit them or not? And then getting granular. Again, going back to some of the numbers, did I hit my profitability goal? Like, was I on track? Was I off track? Like, what happened? Because when we can see that and be able to take the emotion out of it and just say it is what it is, then we can take a step back and say, well, what caused that? What were the things that happened or didn't happen as throughout the year, throughout the month that led to this result? Because all of those are just learning pieces of what we can correct and what we can do differently in the future. So anytime that we're looking back and reflecting on something, obviously there's the how do I manage it during when a big setback happens, but there's also the, okay, now it's all over with. Let's take a step back and reflect on it. I love doing the liked best next time. So if anyone's ever like gone through and done kind of a post-mortem on their goals or anything else like that, it's like what did I like best? What worked really, really well? What did I learn along the way? What are some things that did go in my favor, whether planned or unplanned? And how can I continue to replicate those types of things? And then looking on the opposite side of, well, here's the things that I need to change for next time because XYZ happened, or I learned this along the way. And you can do this on the micro level of this is what happened this last week, and let's do like best next time, or it could be annual plan, or it could be specific events or projects or things like that. So I really like going through that process and just looking at what specifically can we do differently and be as unemotional as possible with it because things do happen, and the greater our feedback, or the faster our feedback loop of what's happening to what was planned, so i.e. looking at your plan every week or every day or something else like that, gives you the ability to react faster versus, well, this thing happened 3 months ago, can't really do anything about it today, and I can either choose to be upset about it or I can learn from it and just continue to move on.
That is so true. And that was one thing when I got the news for this project I was working on. It was a big shift that I had to take in, and I remember having that initial conversation with the with the partner, and I had to say, I just said out loud, it's business. And I kept my cool. I kept it unemotional. And I did give myself some space to have emotions, but I didn't do it on the call. I had my emotions. I talked with a trusted friend. I got all that gunk out. And then I went back to it and said, okay, how can we move forward? So, yes, coming at it from a place of non emotions, but if emotions do arise, to make sure you give yourself some space for that. Maybe it's journaling, go for a walk, these simple things that if there are emotions, to not suppress them, but more so to just give them an outlet, but also keeping your head on your shoulders during those hard conversations. I think that was really what set me up for success in working with this partner in the future, and also knowing where they were coming from was a space of very genuine space. And so allowing those emotions to, okay, if they're there, address them, but also, yeah, give yourself that opportunity to get that gunk out, but keep your cool when you need to. That's what I found anyway.
Yeah, no, that's that. I'm really glad you brought that up because it's especially coming from the frame of like with the numbers are just the numbers. It's just data. It can sometimes come across as, well, your emotions don't matter, and they absolutely do matter. And being able to just do exactly like you said, have a moment where you separate from the actions that are necessary from the emotions that you're feeling. Sometimes that's taking a pause and reflecting upon it. Sometimes it's just like, I need to take a breath and I'm not going to answer that email, that phone call for 10 minutes, and then I'll come back to it. But being able to kind of learn that about yourself of like what's required to take that step back and be able to come back with the kind of logical brain versus the emotional side of things. Um, I've found something at least lately that's been really helpful for me, and that's exploring why do I feel a certain way. So if I feel frustrated or emotional or kind of these different things with when a certain scenario or situation arises, I may not be able to do it right in the moment, but being able to take a step back and say, well, why am I feeling this way? Why, what's causing that? And it's usually something else tied to like, well, um, I'm actually disappointed in myself because I didn't plan for that ahead of time, or uh, I I didn't know what I didn't know, and here's this thing that popped up, and now I need to change what I was doing before. I don't know. It could be a number of different things, but asking kind of those questions I found has been really helpful for me to take a step back and look at, well, what's actually happening, and then asking the same questions of like why would this other person, if it's a partner or something like that, like why did they make this decision, like um, what logically makes sense for them, because the likelihood is y'all are looking at the same thing from different perspectives, and being able to see it from both sides kind of helps bring that tension down and think about how do we logically and ideally unify and move forward versus just having the emotional break and saying, well, it didn't go my way and this sucks and now what do I do?
Yes, that is completely true. And that's like, that was my biggest takeaway. And, we've touched on so many great points in this. And I think this is, to all you listeners out there, if you're dealing with something, you're going through a challenging time, to take these tips into consideration because it's going to happen in business, it's going to happen in life. But what we do with that and how we move forward from it is what really matters. And, I always look at it for character development. I always look at it for, hey, this is something I'm faced with. How can we overcome it? And how can we now have that in my back pocket for next time this comes up or if something else comes up? So I really appreciate it, Tanner. Thank you so much for sharing this incredible conversation.
It's been a lot of fun.